Hi, and welcome back. For anyone who's sticking with this is a history of saps, blackjacks, and slungshots. So I've been going chronologically, basically. Like, if you take all the videos, and it's not easy to do, there's definitely outliers, but more so than not, been going chronologically. So that's why when it comes to this guy here, I'm going to call it the original blackjack, because we started with kind of the more primitive versions real early on. Then you have some indigenous, Native American weapons, North and South America, that don't fit in very well, but still we've been kind of progressing from that, right, 16, 17, 1800s, and into modernity, to kind of the classic tough guy implements of the 20th century. So this one here is going to act as kind of a missing link. This is actually a 20th century blackjack. It's a Buckheimer 211, but it's pretty much identical in form and function to examples found from the Civil War. I don't own an example from the Civil War of this type of configuration, or from that era, so that's why this is going to be a stand-in here. It's pretty surprising then, if you think about it. This exact design, even that hand strap there that we're going to see, the kind of paddle-shaped striking head with a soft load, the flexible, springy shaft, all of that, leather casing, all of that is intact in examples from, say, the mid-19th century. The main difference would actually wouldn't be here in the striking head. You still take your buckshot, right, pack it in the leather, use whatever, here you see that kind of button rivet, but use whatever device you want to put the restraining loop in place and keep it secure. But the handle, that's going to be the big difference between an older version and the 20th century. And the main difference when it comes to that handle, again, the physical properties would basically be the same. This one here, of course, is flexible steel. Here you can see the maker's mark, by the way. See how warped that loop is, and the fact that it stretches out in one direction? That tells me the person who used this was left-handed and held it quite a bit. You saw the marking number there? I'll show that to you for a sec. There's the Buckheimer stamp. Buckheimer is probably the most common maker of saps, and the 211. But you see that shaft there? It's very narrow, right? This is springy because of steel. Well, the Civil War era version would have been whalebone, our old friend whalebone, which again shows that connection between the bosun's cosh and the blackjack. So again, looking at this one and envisioning it's much older than it is, you're talking about kind of a sailor's bosun's cosh moving on to land. I think the whalebone shaft is pretty conclusive evidence of a connection there. So here, if you remember this one here, our kind of colonial sap, which harkens very much back to the sailor weapons and slungshots, that when you look at it, it looks like it's as old as the time frame we're discussing. This one here, even if I had a really older, roughed-up version, people don't think of it as being that old. There's the flexibility, right? Different materials to provide it to you, but still the same idea. And it's just something that a lot of people, even if you know about these kinds of weapons, don't realize. So this type of configuration we're looking at here, and I call it the paddle, like this generic type of shape with the springy handle, even that goes back a ways, whereas that's more usually thought of as a modern 20th century thing. And that's why I entitled this video The Original Blackjack. So if you think way back to my original video, if a sap is more of a sack-like sap, right? Again, that word has more than one meaning, but if a sap is more sack-like and a blackjack is more club-like with a solid shaft, then I'm calling something like this the original blackjack. And there were definitely small weighted clubs prior to that, even flexible ones like the bosun's cosh. I think about the mid-19th century, somewhere in there, probably early 19th century, is the time we can say it, made its debut on land and became the blackjack. So here's another old-timer, if you recall this one, and again, you can glance at this one and imagine it being that old. Even people with just a passing familiarity might look at that, and if you asked them when it came from, they would say a long time ago, right? The modern blackjack, which in this case I'm going to take an example of and call the original blackjack, is not one that you would think of that way. And like I said, we have confirmed cases of weapons like this being carried around by soldiers in the Civil War. It'd obviously be a backup weapon. One writer said it'd be more likely to be used in a friendly card game than in a battle, and certainly it's more of a personal self-defense item. But we do have exact examples like this. I think there's a book called The Civil War Soldier, His Personal Items. I read a while back, and they had one just like this. And now you know, very few people do, that this type of billy that we're looking at right here was in use way back when the older types that were generally thought of like this were being used. Right? Items exactly like this have been dated to the Civil War as well. There's one carried by a Union soldier, and it looks just exactly like this. And this is a sap. We'll do a future video on it, but this is a softened, flexible billy club. And these peculiar guys really disappeared from history. Whenever you see that handle, looks exactly like that, and you can go on eBay and find some, then you'll know that it's that type of weapon from that time frame. So that's our stand-in for the original Blackjack. Weapons type that's been around for a long, long time, lasted into, well, say at least up until the 1980s. And that is something you would not say about all the other types I just reviewed, and more, right? They really kind of disappeared, whereas this one here, simple though it is, really did last. So, take a strange weapon like the Bosun's Kosh, alter it a little bit, mix it in with basically a sap, a soft sap, and you create something that lasts for a very long time. And that is it for the original Blackjack. It's a bold claim. I can't say this exact type is the original, but it's a good enough milestone to use. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.